Today, we are going to study one of the most important political ideologies in Unit 1 of UGC NET Political Science, liberalism. Now, whenever you hear the word liberalism, immediately connect it with one central word, liberty. Liberalism is the political ideology that puts the individual at the center of politics. It asks a very important question. How can we create a society where individuals are free to think, speak, believe, own property, choose their occupation, and develop their personality? So today, we will understand liberalism from beginning to end, its meaning, origin, core values, types, and important thinkers. Let us begin with the meaning. The word liberalism is connected with the idea of freedom. Liberalism is a system of political thought that gives priority to the interests, rights, and goals of the individual over the unlimited power of society or the state.
In simple words, liberalism believes that the state exists for the individual, not the individual for the state.
Standard UGC NET Notes explains liberalism as a school of thought in which the state becomes a means for the ends of the individual. It also highlights individual liberty, human rationality, constitutional government, and consent-based governance as central to liberal thought. Now let us understand the origin. Liberalism emerged mainly in Europe from the 17th century onward. It developed against three major systems: absolute monarchy, feudalism, and the divine right theory of kings. Under feudalism, a person's status was decided by birth. Property, power, and privilege were controlled by kings, nobles, and aristocratic classes. Liberal thinkers challenged this system and argued that human beings are rational individuals and should be free to develop according to their own ability and merit.
Thoughtful. So, students, remember this line. Liberalism arose as a reaction against absolute authority and feudal inequality, and it defended individual liberty, constitutionalism, and limited government. The first and most important theme of liberalism is individualism. Liberalism begins with the individual. It believes that every person has dignity, reason, and capacity for self-development. In feudal society, the individual was trapped inside class, birth, religion, and inherited status. Liberalism broke this idea and said every person should be free to rise according to talent and hard work. John Stuart Mill expressed this idea very strongly when he said, "Over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign." This is one of the most important lines for UGC NET. It means that in matters affecting only the individual should be the final authority. But students, do not misunderstand individualism. Liberal individualism does not always mean selfishness. It means that the individual should not be crushed by monarchy, church, caste, class, or state. The individual should be treated as a thinking, choosing, and responsible being.
However, C.B. Macpherson criticized early liberal individualism through the term possessive individualism. According to him, early liberalism treated the individual as the owner of his own capacities and talents, but ignored social responsibility. This is also very important for UGC NET. Now we move to the second core theme, contract philosophy and limited government. Here the most important thinker is John Locke, known as the father of liberalism. Locke said that in the state of nature, individuals possessed natural rights, life, liberty, and property. But there was no proper authority to protect these rights. Therefore, people created civil society and government through consent. So, for Locke, the state is not divine. The king is not sent by God. The state is created by human beings to protect their rights. This is why liberalism rejects the divine right theory of kings.
Now, if the state is created to protect rights, then the state must also be limited.
It cannot interfere everywhere. It cannot become absolute. This is why liberalism supports constitutional government, rule of law, and consent-based governance. Rule of law means that government itself must work under law. It cannot use power arbitrarily. Students, remember this formula. Locke, its natural rights, plus consent, plus limited government, plus protection of life, liberty, and property. The third core theme is freedom, and this is the heart of liberalism. Liberalism believes that individuals must be free from unnecessary control. But there are two types of freedom that you must understand: negative liberty and positive liberty. Negative liberty means freedom from interference. It asks, how much area is left to the individual without state interference? Early or classical liberals supported negative liberty. They believed that the state should interfere as little as possible. The best state is the one that governs least. Positive liberty, on the other hand, means real ability or opportunity to develop oneself. Modern liberals said that freedom does not mean only absence of restriction. Suppose a person is legally free to study, but has no money, no school, and no opportunity. Is that person really free? Modern liberalism says no. So the state must create conditions, such as education, health, employment, and welfare, so that individuals can actually use their freedom. Isaiah Berlin famously distinguished between negative and positive liberty, and UGC NET often asks this distinction. In simple terms, negative liberty equals freedom from interference. Positive liberty equals freedom as opportunity or self-development. The fourth theme is reason. Liberalism is closely connected with the Enlightenment. Enlightenment thinkers believe that human beings are rational. They can think, debate, question, and decide. Therefore, political authority should not be based on blind tradition, religious domination, or hereditary privilege. Because liberals believe in reason, they also support tolerance. If individuals are rational and different, they may hold different opinions, religions, and ways of life. Liberalism therefore defends freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of conscience. Voltaire is often associated with the spirit of free speech and religious tolerance. Montesquieu is associated with the separation of powers, which prevents concentration of power. The liberal idea is clear. Power should be divided, checked, and limited. Otherwise, liberty will be destroyed. So students, liberalism is not only about economic freedom. It is also about free discussion, open society, rule of law, constitutionalism, and protection from arbitrary power. Now we come to justice and equality in liberalism. Liberalism does not usually support complete equality of outcome. It does not say that everyone must have the same income or same position. Instead, liberalism emphasizes legal equality, equal citizenship, and equality of opportunity. What does this mean? It means that every individual should be equal before law. No one should get special privileges only because of birth, caste, religion, or family. Everyone should have the opportunity to develop according to ability and merit. Classical liberals usually defended strict meritocracy. Modern liberals, however, argued that real equality of opportunity requires some welfare support, because social and economic disadvantages can prevent people from using their freedom. This is where thinkers like John Rawls become important. Rawls is a modern liberal thinker who tried to combine liberty with fairness. He argued that social and economic inequalities are acceptable only if they benefit the least advantaged.
So modern liberalism becomes more sensitive to social justice while still protecting individual liberty.
Now let us study the types of liberalism. First is classical liberalism. Classical liberalism developed mainly in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. It is based on natural rights, limited government, negative liberty, and free market economy. Classical liberals believe that individuals are rational and naturally possess rights. The state is created only to protect these rights. Therefore, the state should be limited. In economic life, classical liberals supported laissez-faire, meaning minimum state interference in the market. Adam Smith's idea of the invisible hand is important here. So classical liberalism says, let individuals act freely, let markets function freely, and let the state interfere only to protect law, order, and rights.
Important thinkers of classical liberalism include John Locke, Montesquieu, Voltaire, Adam Smith, Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, David Ricardo, and Tocqueville. Classical liberalism with natural rights, limited state, laissez-faire, and negative liberty. Remember the formula: classical liberalism, negative liberty, plus limited government, plus natural rights, plus laissez-faire.
Second is modern liberalism, also called positive liberalism or social liberalism. Modern liberalism developed as a response to the limitations of classical liberalism. Classical liberalism said, keep the state away. But modern liberals asked, what happens when poverty, unemployment, illiteracy, and inequality prevent people from enjoying liberty? So modern liberalism gives a positive role to the state. It says the state should not destroy liberty, but it should create the social and economic conditions necessary for liberty. The state may provide education, health, welfare, labor protection, and social security. In this way, modern liberalism shifts from a purely negative view of liberty to a positive view of liberty. It supports welfare measures and economic management. Thinkers associated with modern liberalism include T.H. Green, L.T. Hobhouse, J.A. Hobson, John Rawls, and Ronald Dworkin.
Pause. Students, remember, classical liberalism says state should not interfere. Modern liberalism says state should help individuals become truly free.
Third is libertarianism. Libertarianism developed mainly as a criticism of the welfare state. Libertarians argue that modern liberalism gave too much power to the state in the name of welfare. They wanted to revive the classical liberal idea of minimum state and negative liberty. Libertarianism says individuals should be left alone. Personal responsibility, private property, and free market should be respected. The state should interfere as little as possible in both economic and personal matters. Important libertarian thinkers include Ludwig von Mises, Murray Rothbard, Friedrich Hayek, David Friedman, Milton Friedman, and Robert Nozick. Fourth is neoliberalism. Neoliberalism emerged in the late 20th century. It supports free market, privatization, liberalization, globalization, and a reduced role of the welfare state.
Thoughtful. It is linked with Margaret Thatcher in Britain and Ronald Reagan in the United States. In India, the 1991 economic reforms of liberalization, privatization, and globalization are often discussed as an example of a neoliberal shift. Remember, libertarianism equals leave individuals alone. Neoliberalism equals free market reforms plus limited state plus privatization, globalization.
Now let us quickly revise the important thinkers. John Locke is the father of liberalism. He is associated with natural rights, social contract, consent, and limited government. Montesquieu is associated with separation of powers. Voltaire is associated with freedom of speech and religious tolerance. Adam Smith is associated with laissez-faire and the invisible hand. Thomas Paine is associated with the idea that the state is a necessary evil. J.S. Mill is associated with individual liberty and the harm principle in on-liberty. T.H. Green is associated with positive liberty and social liberalism. John Rawls is associated with justice as fairness, the difference principle, and political liberalism. Friedrich Hayek is associated with free market capitalism and the road to serfdom. Robert Nozick is associated with libertarianism, an anarchy state, and utopia. These thinker book and thinker concept combinations are very important for UGC NET.
Pause. Students, now let us conclude. Liberalism is the ideology of individual liberty, human rationality, constitutionalism, rule of law, consent, limited government, and tolerance. It began as a reaction against monarchy, feudalism, and divine authority.
Its central concern is the individual. Classical liberalism supports negative liberty, natural rights, limited government, and free market. Modern liberalism supports positive liberty, welfare, and social justice. Libertarianism revives the idea of minimal state and individual responsibility. Neoliberalism supports free market reforms, privatization, and globalization. So for UGC NET, remember this final line. Liberalism is a political tradition that begins with individual freedom and develops into a debate over how much state is necessary to protect and realize that freedom.